welcome back. Now, many of you are taking part. If you trust our drinking water, to vote on WeChat, download it in the App Store. Results will be made in the program. Now, as authorities say, the taps won't run dry, but it now appears the problem may be worse than we previously thought, because two-thirds of our drinking water has been contaminated by primitive bacteria.
South Africa is caught in the grip of what scientists describe as the most extreme and protracted El Nino event in recorded history. To date, 4 provinces have been declared drought disaster areas. Extreme conditions in KwaZulu-Natal have seen the levels in Hazelmere Dam slipping to a perilous 25%. And Gauteng residents are facing Phase 2 water restrictions. But dwindling reserves aren't the biggest issue, says water expert Dr. Anthony Turton.
Water quality is our big challenge, not water quantity. While water quantity is a serious matter in its own right, it's the water quality, it's a silent thing that comes through.
What worries him most is this: cyanobacteria, or what's commonly known as blue-green algae, organisms that are 3.5 billion years old.
So your cyanobacteria are the first single-celled life forms that are known to have existed. And because they're single-celled, and because they're the oldest, they're neither plant nor animal. They're both plant and animal, so they are very primitive.
It's estimated that between 50 and 70% of our water reservoirs are contaminated. Now, according to some experts, those contamination levels are the highest in the world.
Previously, government estimates suggested that around 5% of our dams were affected, but new remote sensing technology using satellite images over a 10-year period show that the concentrations are in fact far higher. This pioneering work was done by Dr. Mark Matthews and funded by the CSIR.
The problem is severe and widespread. In all of those dams we had cyanobacteria occurring at one stage or another. And in more than 26 of the 50 dams we had sort of frequent cyanobacteria bloom occurrences.
The Vaal Dam that supplies drinking water to roughly 12 million people in Gauteng looks bleak in this satellite image.
We can see large areas of the lake are covered with cyanobacteria, which is represented here by the bright green color on the screen.
The problem with blue-green algae is that it releases a toxin called microcystin when the cell breaks open during water treatment, a toxin that's been compared to snake venom. But getting rid of the blue-green algae is at best complicated.
If you bring them out of a dam, suck them out of a dam into your pump, and you now put them through a filtration system, and part of that system, for example, chlorine, they suddenly detect the stress, and their final message to you is, I'm stressed, thank you, here's the gift that keeps on giving, okay? That's the problem.
So removing the toxins means additional treatment with chlorine or activated carbon, increasing treatment costs.
They produce these geosmin compounds which affect the taste of the water and lead to complaints with regard to the taste, that's earthy taste.
The cyanobacteria are more than just a threat to our dwindling water. They also come with a variety of health hazards, some fatal.
Researchers have linked the toxin to cancer, Alzheimer's and motor neuron disease, the disease that struck down rugby player Joost van der Westhuizen. Dr. Rachel Dunlop, an Australian scientist, was the lead researcher on a groundbreaking paper on MND. Her search for answers took her to the Pacific island of Guam, which has the highest concentration of motor neuron disease in the world. She discovered that cyanobacteria was present in the roots of cycads, and the seeds were used to make tortillas, a favorite food.
So they were getting a dose of the toxin through the flour. In addition, they had a voracious appetite for fruit bats, and so fruit bats were feeding on the seeds of this particular tree, and therefore the locals would get a dose of the toxin when they ate the fruit bats.
What is it specifically about this toxin that leads to such a devastating disease?
So if it's in our body when we're making proteins, it can get stuck in our proteins by mistake. And this leads to those proteins becoming toxic, building up and causing the cells to die. And we think this may be a trigger for motor neuron disease in susceptible people.
We need more research, but another hypothesis is that the toxins may be present in the fertilizer used on sports fields. This may be how Joost and others ingested the toxin. In places like Zeekoevlei on the Cape Flats, there have also been cases of animals dying as a result of drinking toxic dam water.
A number of recorded deaths of animals and things like that. Even at this lake, Zeekoevlei here, there was an incidence of someone's dog having died as a result of cyanobacteria poisoning.
Hartbeespoort Dam in the northwest province is not only choked up with hyacinth, it's also awash with cyanobacteria blooms.
Hartbeespoort for sure is almost like a chemical reactor for cyanobacteria blooms. It's got very high concentrations of nutrients coming into it. It is extremely warm climate, and so it's a bit of a freak in terms of production. It's one of the most productive reservoirs in the world, actually.
Hartbeespoort resident and founding member of their Water Action Group, Rick van Rossum, is all too familiar with the algae.
Blue-green algae, when it decomposes, becomes a terrible product, very difficult to live with. It smells so bad that people mostly imagine it to be sewage, and it's actually not sewage at all. It impacts on property values, it impacts on your lifestyle, and it's just a terrible mess to have. Dysfunctional
sewage systems are the main reason our dams are so polluted, and it's the reason cyanobacteria flourish.
You can imagine throwing a bath like your swimming pool. Wouldn't be surprised if the next day you came back and it was bright green.
Everything north of the Hillbrow Ridge flows into the Hartbeespoort Dam, and that's millions of people. Okay, their sewage and their effluent is treated by sewage plants, but they can't always cope. And we have a lot of informal settlements who don't have the privilege of running their effluent through a sewage works. It flows directly into the rivers.
Dr. Turton estimates the problem is 200 times greater than acid mine drainage contamination. That's because only 20% of our sewage works are operating optimally.
Which leaves the remaining 80%, which for rounded up purposes is 4,000 megalitres of sewage, untreated or at best partially treated, per day going into our rivers and dams.
Couple this with the drought and we're facing a double calamity, because with no rain the sewage isn't being diluted, leaving water bodies distressed. Department of Water Affairs spokesperson Sputnik Ratau admits it's a problem.
It is a serious issue, where you have obviously the wastewater treatment works that do not function optimally. They also create, a very good arena or situation for the cyanobacteria to thrive.
Given the parlous state of some of our municipalities, like Maribeng near Hartbeespoort, his department has had to sidestep the local authorities and step in. They've also had to throw millions of rands at Hartbeespoort and have set up a monitoring unit to manage the high levels of toxins.
Harties will continue for a while to be a bit of a setback for us because of the influence of some of the effluent that comes from other areas. We will make sure that at some point we can be able to say we are now at the right level of the quality of the water in there.
We're not there yet, though.
Not there yet.
Then throw into the mix the fact that we're the most medicated humans on the planet ever, and these partially metabolized medications are also making their way into our water reservoirs.
Now we've got these chemicals and drugs and partially treated sewage going into this biological reactor, Hartbeespoort Dam, Midmar Dam, call it whatever you want to, okay? Under stressful conditions, elevated temperatures, elevated levels of nutrient flows. So what's now going to happen? Well, things speciate. Chemicals speciate, bacteria mutate, viruses mutate.
What you've just described is quite terrifying. Effectively, our dams are toxic soups.
Primordial toxic soup.
Which may explain why the agricultural sector around Harties is being shunned.
There are several large retailers in this country who have stopped purchasing their products from downriver of the Hartbeespoort because of the possible pollution problems that they may get. It scared away, or rather killed, the tobacco industry downriver. We used to have a very strong tobacco industry all the way down the river to the Limpopo. It's completely gone.
This week it emerged in the press that despite this looming catastrophe, the Department of Water Affairs and Sanitation underspent by 2 billion in the past financial year. 700 million of that meant for the Maribeng area, which has been plagued by dysfunctional water and sewage systems.
On the ground, what are the implications of that underspending?
In relation to where water treatment works or water treatment plants were not acting optimally, there would be an impact on the quality of water supply.
We've spoken to a number of experts who say that we're sitting on a ticking time bomb, that the signs really aren't good. Are they overreacting?
I think, as I indicated earlier, the issue of cyanobacteria is a concern for us. The fact that we do not have sufficient water right now to naturally dilute the bacteria that is in our rivers and so on makes the whole thing worse.
For now, the department assures us our drinking water meets international standards. But Dr. Turton isn't convinced given the high microcystin concentrations.
If that blue-green gets into the bulk water supply, the most sophisticated plant in the country is unable to deal with it. So that now raises another question, and that is, if you're a scientist with a social conscience, as I happen to be, okay, what do? Do you keep quiet and just participate unwittingly in this experiment, or do you actually speak out?
What we need now is a concerted effort by national and local authorities to mitigate the cyanobacteria and to do whatever they can to protect our precious water resource.
Dr. Matthews would like to see additional filtering of river water using retaining wetlands before it flows into our reservoirs. He's also set up an online monitoring service for over 100 dams around the country.
We're also building a website where the public can go and access information on their dam in near real time from 2016 onwards, taking advantage of satellites which have been launched in the last couple of years.
Dr. Turton believes that what we need now, more than anything, is more research. We need to nurture and liberate our scientists to unpack the unknowns.
Really, it's a no-brainer. All of the evidence that's coming back is overwhelming. It's absolutely overwhelming. When you don't know what it is that you don't know, that's your biggest risk. When you start to know what it is that you don't know, now you're dealing with a problem.
Well, the cynic might say there's never been a better time to buy shares in companies that bottle or purify water. For more information on the contamination of our water sources and what can be done to help, go to our Facebook and Twitter pages for the links. Coming up later in the show, we follow the trail of the millions motorists spend, supposedly to support the tire recycling industry. And after the break, we speak to the youngest ever Nobel Peace Prize winner.